All right, President Biden meeting with G7 leaders today. He's also been meeting with his National Security Council this morning in the Situation Room. We do expect to hear from the president at 12:30 Eastern Time, and we will bring that to you live when it eventually does start.
And UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson, John, also speaking soon for a second time today. Johnson already spoke a bit earlier from 10 Downing Street, and he said at that press conference that Putin has chosen a path of bloodshed, adding, quote, "This barbaric venture must end in failure."
Johnson has also promised to impose massive sanctions that would hobble the Russian economy. This as we see NATO promising to continue to beef up its defenses on the eastern flank near the Ukrainian-Russian border.
And we want to show you some more video here into us at Newsmax. Here's some of the large air assault that was happening at the Antonov International Airport, where Russian forces have taken complete control of the airbase. This is near Kyiv, Ukraine. And the Ukrainian President, Vladimir Zelensky, is saying that Russia is also attempting at this hour to seize control of the Chernobyl nuclear plant. So you can imagine there is ground assault, air assault. There is images coming into us of these helicopters at the airport that have been downed. So much, so quickly, John, really eroding here in the hours of the past few hours in Ukraine.
Let's also take a look at what the Russian military has done so far. They've launched their attack on Ukraine from 3 different sides, hitting cities and bases with airstrikes. Ukrainian armed forces say their anti-tank missiles are taking out Russian armor and troops, but of course the Ukrainians are massively outnumbered.
Yes, they are.
Let's welcome in now Colorado Congressman Ken Buck. He's joining us now. He's on the House Foreign Affairs Committee. He's also one of the leading GOP voices on cybersecurity and social media censorship. Congressman, great to have you with us.
Thank you. It's good to be with you, John.
All right, so President Biden and G7 leaders are discussing a joint response to Russia's all-out assault on Ukraine. They're preparing more sanctions. Obviously, the sanctions haven't done much to stop Vladimir Putin. What do you think it's going to get him to take to start to draw back? Or is there anything that can be done at this point to do that?
I don't think he leaves Ukraine anytime soon. I think there are going to be some serious ramifications from what he's done. I think one of them is going to be that NATO is going to be more united than ever. I think you're going to see the defense budgets in the NATO countries increase dramatically. I think President Biden will come to Congress and ask for increases in our defense budget. Our nuclear weapons are old, and frankly, we need upgrades in our nuclear arsenal. And so I think there's going to be a lot of different discussions. There will be economic ramifications from all of this. I think you're going to see the price of fuel go up. And one of the things that President Biden can do, I'm not sure he will, but one of the things he can do is to start increasing production in this country of oil and natural gas so that our energy prices don't go up and our citizens don't start feeling this more and more at the pump.
We've been at war for over 20 years, and a lot of Americans, might not be that familiar with the role of Congress when it comes to declaring war and allocating more resources for war. You mentioned President Biden coming to Congress to ask for those resources. How far are you willing to go to give him that?
Well, I think at a time where a nuclear power has invaded a sovereign foreign country and is threatening the NATO alliance, I think Congress is going to be very sympathetic. I think it is Congress's role to declare war. I think before President Biden introduces troops into any conflict, he should come to Congress. But in terms of just preparing and making sure America is ready for whatever the eventuality is, I think Congress is going to be very, very willing to move forward in that way.
Well, cutting Russia out of the SWIFT financial system, which allows for the global transfer of money from bank to bank, would be potentially catastrophic to Russia's economy and right away. Why do you think that hasn't happened yet?
Well, I think it's one of the sanctions that President Biden has talked about. I think really the president should have acted. There were 120,000 Russian troops on Ukraine's border or more. There was no reason not to start taking these steps before Russia invaded, so that they would be feeling the squeeze during this time frame. So I think hopefully the president makes his announcement in the next half hour about what those sanctions are going to be. But if the world unites, and I'm sure that China won't be with the rest of the world, but if the world unites and really imposes strict sanctions on Russia, the Russian people are going to feel the effects of this war.
Well, we're being told that Boris Johnson is speaking right now. We'll talk about, we've mentioned what he's said so far. I also want to ask you about these cyber attacks. They've been a persistent part of this Russian military assault on Ukraine. You've been a leader on this issue. How vulnerable are we here in the United States to a cyber attack from Russia?
Well, we're very vulnerable, but it's an act of war. I think that any cyber attack on the United States would respond in kind, and I don't think that's something that either Russia or China, our two primary adversaries, want to engage in. We have very advanced cyber capabilities in this country, and I think that if President Putin decides he wants to go down that path, he will be met with very, very strong response by the United States. It is always a prelude to war. It has been recently. The Russians used it effectively in Crimea. I think that they will probably ease up as their military gains a stronger foothold in Ukraine.
Congressman, before we let you go, what about the optics here? We've heard from Boris Johnson, who's speaking live right now. This is his second time addressing his nation, and we still are yet to hear from President Biden. What are your thoughts on that as we look at the USA and our role as a superpower, as we look to where we stand in the coming weeks and months? And optics do matter.
Optics matter, and President Biden has not shown strength. He hasn't shown strength in the withdrawal in Afghanistan. He hasn't shown strength in other areas. I think it's time that President Biden shows strength. I also think it's time that the Secretary of Defense, Secretary of State take a more aggressive position on this. We keep talking about diplomacy. The time for diplomacy is over. The time to make sure that our European allies know that we stand strongly with them and that our sanctions are actually effective. There are sanctions that hurt a country generally, and there are sanctions that hurt the people that are most closely tied to Putin. And those sanctions, those very personal sanctions, should be imposed very quickly.
Congressman, I got to ask you one more question before you leave. We see these protests in Moscow, and this is why we often talk about free speech when it comes to social media platforms. One of the dissidents is using this app Telegram to send messages. It's encrypted. But what is the latest on your efforts and the GOP-led efforts to crack down on the censorship of certain voices on social media apps here?
You know, John, it's a great question, because one of the things that these companies have done is they have really bowed to the pressure from China and Russia and agree to do anything that those countries ask in terms of suppressing speech in those countries. In this country, they have censored conservatives, and we are doing our very best in Congress to pass antitrust legislation so that we have competition in the marketplace. Consumers, those who use social media, are able to choose from a variety of platforms. I think that hopefully those bills, we see them moving in the Senate. Hopefully we start to see some floor action in the House in the next couple of months.
Yeah, sure would have been great if those Hunter Biden stories hadn't been suppressed before the 2020 election. Congressman Ken Buck, great to see you, sir.
Thank you.
Hey, I'm Rob Finnerty. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please join the conversation in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe, too. Hit the bell icon to be alerted to breaking news. And remember, there's a whole lot more on Newsmax TV, America's fastest growing cable news network. Newsmax TV, we're real news for real people.